Chapter 1. The Brunch Ambush. The sun was already high when I pulled into the parking lot of Willow and Vine, the kind of trendy brunch spot Sarah and her friends worshipped. The patio was wrapped in white lattice and draped with vines that looked fake but expensive. Inside, dresses shimmered, glasses clinked, and everything smelled faintly of lavender syrup and entitlement. I checked my watch. 11:28 a.m. 2 minutes early. Sarah loved punctuality. Or maybe she just hated when I wasn't punctual. She texted, "We're inside. Table by the window." I stepped in and spotted them immediately. Sarah in a pale peach dress, her posture flawless, her hair curled into the kind of professionally effortless waves that took 3 hours and a silent meltdown to achieve. On her left sat Megan, who always looked like she was smelling something unpleasant. Across from them were Lily and Hannah, identical in their wide smiles that somehow never reached their eyes. All four heads turned toward me as I approached, but only one pair of eyes didn't flicker away. Sarah's. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not sadness. Something rehearsed. "David," she said brightly, the kind of bright used by flight attendants and people about to fire you. "You made it." "Of course," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She accepted it, but only physically. Her skin barely touched mine. I took the empty seat beside her. "How is everyone?" Megan let out a small laugh. "We're great. Been talking about weddings, actually." "Weddings?" I glanced at Sarah. She lifted her mimosa, swirling the orange liquid with unnecessary elegance. Perfect timing. A server arrived with menus before I could ask what that meant. Sarah didn't even look at hers. She always ordered the same thing. Egg white omelet. No cheese, add spinach. Dressing on the side, she said smoothly, and the others chimed in with similar precision. I ordered a normal breakfast, something with real eggs and actual flavor, and earned myself a disapproving glance from Megan. I ignored it. Small talk began. Or rather, they talked, and I nodded when convenient. I told Sarah she should go with blush rose instead of ivory for the bouquet, Lily said. "But ivory is classic," Hannah argued. Sarah waved a hand. "Well, actually, I'm thinking none of it matters anymore." They giggled. I smiled politely, but something tugged at the back of my mind. Her foot wasn't touching mine under the table today. She always rested her foot against mine during group outings, a silent anchor, or maybe a claim. Today, there was empty space. The server returned with drinks. Sarah didn't look at me as she took hers. She inhaled slowly, sitting straighter, as if centering herself for something. And suddenly, she tapped the side of her glass with a small, decisive ting-ting-ting. The noise cut through the restaurant. I looked at her, confused. Her friends looked at her with anticipation. And in that breath, in that very second, I knew something was wrong. Sarah flashed a bright, crystalline smile, the kind she used when posing for photos. "Ladies," she began, voice light, and David. The pause after my name had weight. Hannah grinned. Megan's eyes gleamed. Something cold slithered down my spine. Sarah raised her glass slightly. "Since everyone is here, I might as well say it clearly." I set my fork down. "I'm calling off the marriage," she said cheerfully. The clatter of forks and plates and distant chatter faded like someone had dragged a blanket over the world. The words hung there, suspended, unreal. I blinked. "What?" Her smile widened. "I don't love you anymore, David." Lily let out a little gasp, followed by a stifled laugh. Megan bit her lip like she was trying not to grin. Hannah looked at me like I was the punchline to a joke she'd been waiting weeks to hear. Sarah continued, savoring every word. "I just feel like we've grown apart. And I thought, why not share it with the people who've supported me through this realization?" Supported her? Realization? What realization? When? I heard my heartbeat in my ears, a steady, heavy thud, thud, thud. She kept going, almost gleeful now. "I mean, better to end it before the wedding, right? We're saving each other time. And money." She laughed softly. "It's for the best." Lily added, "You're being so brave, Sarah." Hannah nodded vigorously. So strong. They were performing. This was a show, a stage, an audience. And the script had been written without me. My chair felt suddenly too small. My clothes too tight. But as I stared at Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, something unexpected rose beneath the shock. Relief. It came quietly, like warm water spreading through frozen veins. A subconscious exhale that seemed to come from a deeper truth I hadn't been willing to face. I didn't love her either. Not really. Not anymore. We've been living in the shell of something that used to be alive. The realization was so sudden that the hurt didn't fully land. It was as if the universe had just cleared a fog I didn't know was there. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not my fiancée, not my future wife, but a stranger wearing the mask of the woman I once imagined spending my life with. She tilted her head, clearly waiting for me to crumble. Her friends leaned forward eagerly. They wanted a scene. They expected it. They were hungry for it. But the only thing I felt was a strange, clear calm. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said softly. Sarah blinked. "What?" I met her gaze, steady, unbroken. "Thank you for your honesty." The table went still. Megan's smirk faltered. Lily's eyebrows shot up. Anna looked like someone had unplugged her. Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. I reached for her left hand. She didn't pull away. Shock immobilized her. Gently, without drama, I slid the engagement ring off her finger. "That's yours," I said simply. The restaurant around us buzzed faintly, but our table was suspended in silence. I set the ring in front of her. The metal glinted under the afternoon sun, a tiny symbol of something already dead. Sarah stared at it like it had betrayed her personally. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped softly against the tile, the only sound in the world for a moment. I stood, and I smiled. Not cruelly, not smugly, just peacefully, like a man who had been freed without realizing he was imprisoned. "I wish you all the best," I said quietly. Then, without raising my voice, without looking back, without giving the audience the spectacle they wanted, I turned and walked out of Willow and Vine, leaving behind the brunch, the ring, the confusion, and her. Chapter 2. Aftermath and Reflection. The moment the brunch restaurant door closed behind me, the world felt strangely louder. Cars droned down the street. Horns sounded distantly, and a breeze rustled the leaves of the sidewalk trees, small, normal noises that felt surreal after the chaos I just walked away from. I took a slow breath, then another. My hands trembled slightly, but not with panic. More like aftershocks for something that should have broken me, but somehow hadn't. I stepped off the curb and started walking with no destination. The city stretched ahead. Boutiques, coffee shops, people laughing at outdoor tables. Life continued, indifferent to the implosion I just experienced. I replayed the scene in my mind, the too bright smile on Sarah's face, the satisfied expressions of her friends, the rehearsed cruelty. But instead of slicing me open, the memory made something inside me settle, like a piece of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "She doesn't love you anymore." The words should have shattered me. Instead, they echoed like confirmation. Of course she doesn't. She hasn't for a long time. I walked past a bookstore and caught my own reflection in the glass. My expression surprised me. I didn't look devastated or angry. I looked unburdened. What does that say about our relationship? I murmured aloud. A man walking his dog glanced at me as he passed. I gave a small, self-conscious smile and kept walking. My phone buzzed. 3 texts from unknown numbers, probably Sarah's friends. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I could practically hear the tone already. "David, are you okay?" We didn't know she was going to say that. "You should talk to her. She's emotional." Lies, half-truths, or attempts to twist the story. I silenced my phone. My feet carried me toward a small park near the city center, a place Sarah always said was too crowded for her taste. I sat on a bench and stared at the fountain. My mind drifted back. 6 months ago, we had been at another brunch, back when her touches were warm and natural. She had reached across the table to fix my collar, smiled at me like I was her anchor. When had that changed? I leaned back on the bench, eyes tracing the arc of water falling from the fountain's top basin. Red flag number 1. Her phone habits. Sarah used to leave her phone anywhere on the couch, the kitchen counter, in her bag. Then, slowly, she began guarding it like a dragon over treasure, turning the screen away when she typed, taking calls in the hallway, setting new passwords. I remembered the first night she put her phone face down during dinner. I'd asked jokingly, "Hot secret spy business?" She'd snapped, "It just worked, David. Not everything is about you." But she wasn't angry. Not really. She was defensive, a lie hiding behind frustration. I watched a couple stroll hand in hand past the fountain, laughing, their fingers intertwined naturally, without effort. It struck me how long it had been since Sarah and I held hands like that. Months, maybe. Red flag number 2. Her distance. Sarah used to curl into my side during movies. Then she started sitting at the far end of the couch, claiming she was too warm. She used to ask how my day was. Then she started responding with a distracted, "Uh-huh," while scrolling through her phone. She used to kiss me goodnight. Then she started saying, "I'm tired," and turning away before I even got into bed. When had I stopped questioning it? When had I accepted scraps and called it normal? A pang of embarrassment hit me, not for losing her, but for ignoring the signs. I stood and kept walking, turning down a quieter street lined with older buildings and shaded sidewalks. My shoes echoed faintly. More memories trickled in. Red flag number 3. Her excuses. There was the week she suddenly had nightly training sessions at the gym. Before that, she couldn't name a single treadmill brand. There was the sudden work trip that no one at her company could later confirm. I'd asked her about that once. She'd rolled her eyes and said, "David, do you think I'd lie about my career? Honestly, grow up." I had apologized for daring to notice the cracks. I stopped walking for a moment and leaned against a brick wall, closing my eyes. Why hadn't I seen what was happening? Or maybe I did see it, but I didn't want to face what it meant. Being with Sarah had become comfortable in the way old coats are comfortable. Familiar, even if they don't fit anymore. Even if they suffocate. Another breeze passed, cooler this time. I opened my eyes and continued down the sidewalk. I thought about the last time we laughed together. Really laughed. I couldn't remember, but I remembered the last time she criticized me. It was right before her bachelorette planning weekend. I had tried to help her carry boxes of decorations to the car. "Careful, David," she'd snapped. "You're holding it wrong." "It's a box," I joked. "There's no wrong way. There is when you ruin the corners." Then she'd sigh dramatically, brushing past me. I remembered standing there, wondering how everything had become so sharp. A couple of teenagers jogged past me. One bumped my shoulder lightly and shouted, "Sorry, man." The spontaneity of it made me smile. I reached a pedestrian bridge that crossed over a small river slicing through the city. I leaned on the railing and watched ripples shimmer under the afternoon light. The relief inside me was growing stronger now, no longer subtle. It felt like taking my first full breath after being underwater too long. I whispered to myself, losing her might be the best thing that could have happened. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't denial. It was simply true. She had been slipping away for months, emotionally gone long before her public declaration. I'd sensed it, felt it in the quiet, in the coldness, in the way she looked at me like I was furniture. Today had only confirmed what my heart had known. I stayed on the bridge a while longer, letting the wind cool the back of my neck. My mind wandered through memories, some good, some painful, most hollow. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to hold them together or fix anything. I was letting go. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't even take it out. Instead, I slipped it deeper into my pocket and walked off the bridge, heading nowhere in particular, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Light, not healed, not victorious, but lighter, as if someone had cut the strings I didn't know were tied to me. And for the first time since the brunch, maybe for the first time in years, I felt the smallest spark of something like hope flicker inside my chest. Losing Sarah wasn't the disaster it should have been. It wasn't a collapse. It might actually be the beginning of something better. And in that quiet, steady realization, my relief only grew stronger. Chapter 3, The Discovery. I didn't go home right away after leaving the bridge. I wandered more, letting the city wear down the last of the adrenaline. But eventually, as evening shadows stretched long across the pavement, the air cooled enough to push me toward my apartment. The place felt unfamiliar when I walked in, as if stepping into someone else's home, or maybe into the remnants of a life that no longer belonged to me. I dropped my keys in the bowl on the entry table, a bowl Sarah had insisted was aesthetic. The silence settled heavy around me. For the first time since the brunch, the question started whispering. Who was she really? How long was she planning this? Why today? Why like that? I sank onto the couch and stared at the blank television screen. My chest tightened, not with heartbreak, but with something more disorienting. Uncertainty. Then another question surfaced, quieter but sharper. What else don't I know? It was an uncomfortable thought, but one I couldn't shake. Sarah had blindsided me so expertly, so confidently, that it made me wonder how long she'd been preparing, and why she looked so satisfied doing it. I stood and walked toward the small office we shared. Or rather, the office I used. Sarah only stepped inside to put down mail or leave a coffee cup she forgot about. I flicked on the light. Paper stacks, tax documents, binders, nothing unusual at first glance. But the longer I stood there, the more something felt off, like the calm before a storm that hasn't fully reached you yet. I pulled out the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one with our joint accounts, utilities, and financial paperwork. Everything was organized, alphabetical, just like I had set it up. I started flipping through folders. Nothing jumped out until I reached the back. Tucked behind our shared documents was a folder I didn't recognize. A plain black folder. No label. I frowned. Sarah never filed anything without labeling it. If she needed a folder, she'd buy 3 in pastel colors and a matching label maker. This wasn't her style. I pulled it out and placed it on the desk. For a moment, I just stared at it, my fingers tracing the edge. Do I open this? Do I want to know? Curiosity won. When I lifted the cover, a neat stack of papers greeted me. At first, they looked like ordinary credit card statements, except the accounts weren't familiar, and the name on the top wasn't Sarah's. It was mine. My stomach tightened. I flipped to the next page, and the next, and the next. Each statement showed thousands of dollars in activity, clothing stores I'd never heard of, hotel charges in cities I hadn't visited, online orders for items I didn't own. My throat dried as I scanned the totals. $1,921.45, $3,782.90, $4,566, $8,233.19 page after page. My hands grew colder with every line. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my credit monitoring account. The site loaded slowly, painfully. My jaw clenched. 4 new credit cards were listed. None opened by me. All opened in the last 9 months. The balances totaled $47,302.77. A numb buzzing filled my ears. No, this can't be right, I whispered to myself. I checked the application details. Everyone used my social security number, my old work address, my email. Someone had built entire financial identities under my name, and someone had spent almost $50,000 in less than a year using those identities. The realization slammed into me like cold water. Sarah. It had to be Sarah. She had access to everything, my SSN, my documents, my laptop, our mail. She knew my passwords. I'd never hidden anything from her. I leaned back in the chair, the room spinning slightly. My hands shook as I gripped the armrests. Why? Was this part of the reason she'd been so eager to humiliate me today? Had this been a long game? Her exit strategy? But the financial shock wasn't the end. Something in me knew there was more. I opened Sarah's email account on my laptop, not because I wanted to snoop, but because after the fraud, after her cold announcement at brunch, after everything, the pieces didn't add up. Her inbox opened. Thousands of messages, normal ones at first glance. Work updates, online receipts, hair appointments. But then I noticed a folder on the left panel. A hidden folder titled Personal, password protected. Curiosity no longer felt optional. It was survival. I typed one of her common passwords. Denied. The second. Denied. The third. The fourth. The fifth. Denied. I stared at the screen, frustrated, until a memory surfaced. The day she changed her phone password. She joked she used something you'll never guess. Her cat's name, but backwards. I typed it in. The folder opened. Hundreds of emails filled the screen. My breath caught in my throat. Photos, messages, hotel confirmations, meetup spots, Screenshots, selfies, private conversations with men I'd never seen. Messages like, "Can't wait to see you tonight. He won't be home until late. You looked amazing in that black dress. Wish I could wake up next to you instead. I miss you already. Tell him you're working late if you need an excuse." Did he suspect anything last night? My vision blurred. A burning pressure built behind my eyes, but no tears came. I clicked another thread, and another. Different names, different faces, different cities. It wasn't one affair. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a double life, a network of lies, a version of Sarah I didn't recognize. One photo made me freeze completely. Sarah in a hotel mirror, wearing lingerie I'd never seen, holding her phone up while a man's arms wrapped around her from behind. The timestamp was from 2 months ago, a night she claimed she'd been at her best friend's apartment to vent about work. My stomach twisted so painfully it felt like something was digging inside my ribs. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I almost married, hadn't just been distant. She had been gone. Gone for months. Gone from the relationship. Gone from honesty. Gone from any version of the life we were supposed to build together. And then she had humiliated me in public. Not out of sudden emotion. Not out of confusion. But out of strategy. To get ahead of the story. To make me look like the reason. To protect herself. My hands hovered above the keyboard as the full picture came into focus. The humiliation at brunch hadn't been the betrayal. It had been the performance to cover the real betrayal. The deeper betrayal. The one hidden in folders, in secret accounts, in stolen identity, in strangers' hotel rooms. I closed the laptop slowly. My breath was shallow, tight, ragged. I whispered into the empty room. Who the hell was I engaged to? Silence answered. And in that silence, the truth sank in. The woman I loved hadn't just hurt me. She had built an entire hidden life without me. And I was only now seeing the surface of it. Chapter 4, Meeting the Other Man. David hesitated outside the cafe's glass door, the cool metal handle chilling his palm before he pushed it open. A faint bell chimed overhead. The air inside carried the scent of roasted beans, cinnamon, and the faint hum of quiet conversation. His chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the surreal absurdity of what he was about to do. He was here to meet one of the men Sarah cheated with. His fiancée. The woman who'd humiliated him in front of her friends. The woman who'd left $47,000 in debt tied to his name. And now, he was meeting one of her lovers like it was some grim business appointment. His eyes scanned the room. There, near the back window, sat a man who looked like he'd aged 3 years in the last 3 days. Neatly dressed, a pressed button-up shirt, clean-shaven, trying hard to maintain composure. But the way he kept checking his phone, the way his legs shook under the table, gave him away. James Portman, the name for messages, the man in photos, the one who had no idea she was engaged. David walked toward him. James looked up at the sound of footsteps. His eyes widened slightly, pain, confusion, dread, all mixing in an instant. "David?" James asked, standing as if meeting the father of a girl he'd accidentally offended. "David Turner?" "Yeah," David said quietly. "You must be James." They shook hands, an absurd show of politeness given the circumstances, but neither knew what else to do. James gestured for him to sit. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't hostile. It was heavy, thick with the kind of shared betrayal that didn't need words. Finally, James exhaled shakily. "I'm really glad you reached out," he said, "though I don't think glad is the right word." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I haven't slept since you messaged." "I get it," David said. "I haven't slept much either." The waiter approached, offering menus, but both men shook their heads. The conversation didn't need interruptions or lattes. James leaned forward, his voice low. "Look, before anything else, David, I swear on my life, I had no idea she was with someone. She told me she was divorced." David nodded. "I figured as much. You're not the enemy here." Relief washed visibly over James' face. His shoulders sagged, as if a burden eased, though not removed. "She told me," James continued, "that she'd been divorced for 3 years, that she lived alone, that her ex was controlling, that he still stalked her accounts, so she had to hide things." He shook his head. eyes dark with embarrassment. I can't believe I bought it. David clenched his jaw. She said something similar to me, about needing privacy, wanting space, not wanting to share her phone or accounts because boundaries matter. Turns out those boundaries were just walls she used to hide everything. James let out a humorless laugh. She's good at lying. Too good. Yeah, David said quietly. I'm starting to see that. James swallowed, reached into his messenger bag, and pulled out a slim tablet. I want you to see something, he said. I think it'll help us figure out how long she's been doing this. David's stomach nodded. James unlocked the screen and opened a folder labeled simply Sarah. Photos appeared first. Selfies. Smiling shots. Some taken in hotel rooms David didn't recognize. Some taken in parks he did. And then, interspersed between them, photos of her with James, laughing, kissing his cheek, leaning into him. David's throat tightened, not from heartbreak, but from the crushing realization of how deeply she could fake affection. James tapped the message tab. She told me she loved me, he said quietly. Last week, I thought we were building something real. David inhaled sharply but gently. I get it. In a twisted way, he did. He had once believed Sarah loved him too. She was with me the night before the brunch, David said. Told me she loved me when she went to bed. His voice hardened, and then she dumped me in front of her friends like it was some kind of performance. James's eyes widened. Brunch? He repeated. What brunch? David paused, realizing James knew none of it. She broke off the engagement, David explained. Publicly, loudly, in front of her friends. Told me she didn't love me anymore. James looked horrified, and she was with me the next day, literally that evening. She said she had a stressful family meeting that morning and needed comfort. David laughed, broken, half amused, half exasperated. Family meeting. Yeah, that tracks. James covered his face with his hands. Jesus Christ. They sat in silence again, both absorbing the reality of her duplicity. Eventually, James lowered his hands and said, David, I don't just feel betrayed. I feel stupid. She showed me this whole future we were supposed to have. Told me she wanted to move in together soon. David blinked. Move in together? Yeah. James swallowed. She picked out apartments for us to tour. David let out a slow, steady breath. All the excuses suddenly made sense. The night Sarah didn't come home, the late work meetings, the weekend she insisted on solo trips to clear her mind, and the constant coldness whenever David asked about wedding plans. It wasn't emotional distance. It was an entire second relationship. How long? David asked. How long were you two seeing each other? James opened another folder, screenshots, logs, dated photos. 8 months, he said quietly. Our first date was in March. David felt the air leave his lungs. 8 months, he repeated. She and I got engaged in April. James stared at him, stunned. She started dating me a month before your engagement? David nodded slowly. Not shocked, just sickened. She told me, James whispered, that her ex-husband forced her into engagements. Plural. She said she ran away from that life. David scoffed. Her ex-husband? I'm not even her husband yet. James blinked twice. You're the one she meant? Apparently. James sat back, absorbing the magnitude of the lie he'd been sold. Then he opened one more file, a voice recording. I think you should hear this, James said. She sent it to me the day before your brunch. David hesitated before nodding. A second later, Sarah's voice filtered out, soft, affectionate, deceitfully warm. Hey baby, I'm sorry I can't see you today. I'm stuck dealing with my ex again, and it's draining. Once this is all done, I'll finally be free of him. I promise this is the last hurdle before a life together. David felt cold. James paused the audio. She said she was divorcing him. James said quietly. David stared at the table. There is no divorce. There is no ex. There's only me. James pressed his lips together, anger flickering beneath the heartbreak. We're both victims, he said. We both deserve to know the truth. Let's piece together the timeline, everything she told you, everything she told me. David nodded. For the next hour, they compared dates, shared screenshots, cross-referenced everything, from hotel charges to location data, even overlapping excuses she'd given each of them. Patterns emerged. Lies aligned. Moments that once felt confusing snapped into place with painful clarity. Piece by piece, they reconstructed Sarah's hidden life, a dual existence neither had suspected. When they finally leaned back, exhausted, the map of her deceit was undeniable. It wasn't just cheating, James murmured. It was a whole double life. David nodded slowly. Yeah, and we finally see it for what it is. And with that realization, shared between two strangers bound by betrayal, the chapter ended exactly where it was meant to. Two men, sitting across from each other, finally understanding the true scope of Sarah's lies. Chapter 5, Legal Steps and Family Support. The next morning, David woke with a tension in his shoulders that felt like it had settled there overnight, a weight pressing down on him. Yesterday had been an avalanche, the brunch humiliation, the discovery of the debt, the meeting with James. His mind was a fractured mosaic of betrayal and clarity. Today, though, today required action. He sat up, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and exhaled slowly. He had evidence. Documents. Statements. Screenshots. Logs. He had a witness. Ironically, one of Sarah's own affairs. And he was done being passive. The police station. The city police station was busier than he expected for a weekday morning. Phones rang. Officers talked rapidly into radios. Clerks typed with mechanical speed. David stepped inside, clutching the folder he'd spent half the night organizing. Every fraudulent bill, every bank notice, every email that wasn't his but was signed with his name. At the reception desk, a stern, middle-aged officer glanced up. "Morning. How can I help you?" David swallowed. I need to file a report. Identity theft. Fraud. A substantial amount." The officer's expression softened from bureaucratic neutrality to focused professionalism. "All right, step over here. We'll get you started." He was led into a small interview room, a metal table, hard chairs, a wall clock that ticked too loudly. After a few minutes, a detective in a navy blazer entered. He had sharp eyes and a patient demeanor. "I'm Detective Morales," he said, extending a hand. "Tell me what's going on." David opened the folder with a shaky exhale. "It's a lot, and it's personal. But here." For the next 20 minutes, he laid everything out. How Sarah had enrolled credit cards in his name. How accounts were opened without his knowledge. How debt had accumulated under the radar. He explained the brunch breakup, the hidden life, the messages and photos from James, and how all of it connected. Detective Morales took notes quickly, nodding occasionally, frowning at certain details. 47,000, Morales repeated, flipping one of the papers. "That's not trivial. And these signatures definitely forged. Consistent pattern." David nodded. "She had access to my info. I trusted her. That's how most cases start," Morales said gently. "You're not alone in that." He continued through the documents, sorting them with an efficiency that made David feel slightly lighter, as though the detective was pulling weight off his shoulders a page at a time. "Do you have anyone who can corroborate her actions?" Morales asked. David hesitated. "Yes. Actually, one of the men she cheated with. James Portman. He didn't know she was engaged, and she lied to him about pretty much everything. He has messages, photos, proof of her deception." Morales raised an eyebrow. "If he's willing to speak with us, it strengthens the case." "He is," David said. "He wants the truth out as much as I do." The detective set down his pen and folded his hands. "We'll process your statement. You've done the right thing coming here. This is fraud, an identity theft. We'll investigate." David exhaled with a shudder he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you." Morales gave him a small, steady nod. "You're not the first person to trust the wrong partner. You handled yourself better than many." David closed the folder and stood. The air in his lungs felt just a bit freer. Calling his parents. Outside the station, David walked slowly toward his car, the morning sun warming his jacket. And then, like a final push from reality, his phone buzzed. It was his mother. He stared at her name, realizing she still had no idea what had happened. He hadn't told his parents anything yet. Not about the breakup. Not about the debt. Not about the double life of the woman they believed would become their daughter-in-law. He pressed the call button. "David? Honey, how are you? You sound tired." He closed his eyes. "Mom, is Dad with you?" Yes, he's right here. Why? What's going on? David paused, his throat tightening. I need to tell you both something. Can you put it on speaker? A faint rustle. Okay, we're listening, his father's voice said, steady as always. David leaned against his car door. The wedding, it's off. Silence. Not confusion, just stunned quiet. His mom spoke first. What happened? She called it off a brunch, David said, in front of her friends. She said she didn't love me anymore. His mother gasped. In public? But it was his father who asked quietly, why? What caused that kind of behavior? David exhaled shakily. That's just the beginning. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She's been opening credit cards in my name. Accounts. Debt. Almost $50,000. Both parents reacted at once. What? Oh my God, David. He pushed on, steady. She also had multiple affairs. One of the men didn't know she was engaged. He helped me piece together what she'd been doing. Another beat of silence, this one full of anger, heartbreak, disbelief. Finally, his father spoke, calm but shaking with controlled rage. Son, I'm so sorry. That woman, she did more than betray you. She tried to destroy your future. His mother's voice was trembling. Why didn't you call us sooner? You shouldn't go through this alone. David swallowed. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. You don't have to handle everything alone. Not this. Not something this cruel. His father cleared his throat, regaining that protective steadiness. Listen to me, David. You did the right thing filing a report. We'll support you through everything. You just dodged a financial nuclear disaster. David let out a weak, humorless laugh. That's exactly what it feels like. It's exactly what it is, his father said. This could have ruined your life if it continued. But you caught it. You stopped it. His mother added softly. And we're proud of you for staying calm through something so heartbreaking. David blinked rapidly as the tightness behind his eyes returned, not from pain, but from something he hadn't felt since before the brunch. Support. Belonging. A reminder that he wasn't standing against this storm alone. His father asked, Do you want to come over tonight? We'll make dinner. You can breathe a little. David smiled faintly. Yeah, I think I'd like that. We're here for you, his mother said again. Always. After they hung up, David leaned back against the car, eyes closing as a long, steady breath escaped him. For the first time since Sarah's public ambush, since the betrayal, the lies, the discoveries, he felt the sharp loneliness in his chest soften. He wasn't isolated. He wasn't abandoned. He wasn't fighting a war by himself. He had evidence. He had legal support. He had James's testimony. And now, most importantly, he had his family standing behind him. For the first time since the brunch, David no longer felt alone. Chapter 6. Planning the Dodge to Disaster Party. David sat at his kitchen table with a blank notebook in front of him. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt breathable. Not peaceful, no, not yet, but spacious in a way that only came after someone toxic exited your life, even if the exit was messy. He tapped a pen thoughtfully against the table. Sarah had humiliated him publicly. Sarah had lied publicly. Sarah had engineered the brunch moment as a performance. And the more days passed, the more messages he received from confused friends asking versions of. What happened? Why did she end things like that? She's saying you were controlling? She told us you cheated? Every rumor, every twist of the truth, every outrageous spin sat like a stone in his stomach. He wasn't seeking revenge, but he was seeking clarity, and clarity required light. He exhaled slowly, picked up the pen, and wrote across the top of the page. Dodge a disaster party. Presentation outline. He stared at the words. They looked ridiculous, bold, therapeutic, and strangely empowering. He whispered to himself, not revenge, just the truth. Let people decide. Brainstorming the event. He turned on his laptop and opened a document titled Timeline of Events. It quickly grew messy. Brunch ambush. Public breakup, discovering the debt, meeting James, identity theft evidence, text messages, bank statements, forged signatures, photos dated and time-stamped. Halfway down the list, he murmured, "This is insane." But the more he typed, the more a plan began forming. Not a chaotic one, not an angry one. A simple, fact-based narrative. He wasn't going to rant. He wasn't going to shout. He wasn't going to insult Sarah. He would present evidence. That was it. The truth would do the talking. Calling his friend Mia, David dialed one of the few people he trusted completely. Mia answered on the second ring. "Hey, stranger," she said. "How are you holding up?" "Somewhere between exhausted and weirdly motivated," he replied. "That sounds dangerous." "Probably is. Listen, can I run something by you?" "Shoot." David explained the idea. A large gathering, a factual presentation, a kind of public reset button to undo the humiliation Sarah had staged. When he finished, Mia was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Okay. First, that's insane. Second, I absolutely love it. It's not revenge," he insisted. "I want everything factual. No commentary. Just truth." "I know you," she said. "You're not petty. If anyone could make a truth presentation classy, it's you. What do you need from me?" "Help with logistics, venue suggestions, and maybe a sanity check." Mia laughed. "David, after what she did, you're allowed to go a little insane. But in this case, honestly, it's genius." Her unwavering support made something click. The plan wasn't just possible. It felt right. Finding the venue. 2 days later, David found himself touring a mid-size event hall with Mia at his side. The coordinator, a cheerful man named Lucas, walked them through the space. "This hall fits about 200 people comfortably," Lucas explained. "Audio system is built in. Projector included. Plenty of seating options." David tested the projector with his USB drive. The preview slide appeared on the wall. "Dodge a disaster. A factual timeline." Mia slapped his arm. "Oh my God, you actually made a title slide." "It looks professional," David muttered, slightly embarrassed. "It looks iconic." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "So, what kind of event is this exactly?" David hesitated. "A presentation. A truth-sharing event." Lucas nodded slowly, deciding not to pry. "Well, we've hosted stranger things." Building the presentation. That night, David sat surrounded by piles of digital and physical evidence. Folders, screenshots, emails, financial statements, photographs, each one cataloged, labeled, and time-stamped. He spoke aloud as he organized them. Slide 1. Brunch ambush. Slide 2. Anonymous credit card overview. Slide 3. Matching forged signatures. Slide 4. Messages Sarah sent while we were together. Slide 5. Timeline overlap with James. Slide 6. Debt accumulation history. He paused, rubbing his face. "This is insane," he repeated. But then he remembered the smirks on Sarah's friends' faces at brunch, the cruel satisfaction in her voice, the story she had already begun spreading. He clicked back into focus. Truth, not revenge. Facts, not anger. He added a note to the top of the slide deck. No insults. No commentary. Just evidence. He would let people draw their own conclusions. Drafting the invitations. David sat at his computer, drafting a simple but firm message. "You are invited to the Dodge the Disaster party, a factual presentation regarding recent events. This is not a revenge event. This is not a roast. This is a truth-sharing session with verified evidence. Attend or not, but you deserve to know the facts." David Mia proofread it over his shoulder. "It's perfect," she said. "Calm. Neutral. Devastating." Devastating wasn't the goal. It's the vibe, though. He sent the invitations, 247 of them, to co-workers, friends, old classmates, extended family, neighbors, Sarah's acquaintances, mutual circles, anyone who asked what happened, anyone who deserved clarity, and, yes, to Sarah's friend group, the ones who had laughed at brunch. He hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then, click, invitation fallout. His phone started buzzing almost instantly. The first messages were from close friends. "I'm absolutely coming." "Dude, yes, transparency. You're handling this better than I would." Then came the hesitant ones. What exactly happened? Is this real? I thought she said you cheated." David answered the same way every time. "Come to the event. Everything will be clear." As hours passed, the tone of the responses shifted. Some were shocked. Some were supportive. Some were angry on his behalf. And some, especially from Sarah's circle, were cautious, confused, or defensive. One text from Sarah's friend, Elise, stood out. "David, I don't know what this is, but Sarah told us awful things. If this is some revenge stunt, count me out." He calmly replied, "No revenge. Only facts. Attend if you want the truth." She didn't respond. But 3 hours later, his email pinged. RSVP. Attending. The RSVPs flood in. By midnight, David sat on the couch staring at the invitation dashboard. 78 responses. Then 102. Then 138. Every few minutes, the number ticked up. By the next afternoon, it hit over 170 confirmed guests. Mia called him breathless. "David, you're going viral in our friend group." "That's not comforting." "It should be. People want the truth, and they trust you to tell it." David rubbed his temples, overwhelmed. "I didn't expect this." "Well," Mia said, "when someone lies loudly, the truth gets an audience." He sat very still. She was right. Sarah had made her breakup public. Her lies had been whispered, repeated, reshaped, weaponized. He wasn't fighting with her. He wasn't retaliating. He was reclaiming his story. When he closed his laptop that night, the RSVPs had reached 173. His hands trembled slightly from the weight of it all: fear, anticipation, catharsis, and an incredible, grounding sense of purpose. The truth was coming. Chapter 7: The Party and the Evidence. The venue was never meant for this kind of gathering. It had been designed for elegant galas, corporate launches, carefully curated celebrations, not for a truth-revealing event hosted by a man whose entire life had been detonated in slow motion. Yet, as the clock struck 7, a steady stream of guests poured through the glass doors, whispering to each other as they checked the event name again and again on the board, as if unable to believe it. Dodged a disaster party, hosted by David Hamilton. It sounded like a joke. It wasn't. By the time the last registration tablet beeped, 173 people had entered the hall. Coworkers, mutual friends, her friends, his friends, extended family. People who had known David and Isabella as the perfect couple. People who had once toasted to their future. Now they were here to witness its autopsy. The atmosphere buzzed with low murmurs as guests took their seats at the round tables arranged before the large digital screen. Soft lighting washed over the room, leaving the front stage in a crisp focus. Some people laughed nervously. Others appeared solemn, unsure of what exactly they were about to watch. David stood behind the curtains, taking a slow breath as he adjusted the stack of documents in his hands. His suit was sharp, pressed, deliberate, chosen not to impress, but to anchor him. Tonight wasn't about revenge. Tonight was about truth, clarity, and finally letting the weight slip off his shoulders. A staff member peeked in. "Mr. Hamilton, everyone seated. Whenever you're ready." He nodded. He stepped out. The room fell into immediate silence. There was no grand introduction, no dramatic music, just the soft hum of the projectors warming and the subtle, steady sound of David's footsteps as he approached the podium. He placed his notes down, looked over the crowd, and remarkably smiled. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice calm, controlled, the voice of someone who had rehearsed every syllable but carried each one from a place of truth. "I know many of you were curious about this event. Thank you for coming. Tonight, I'd like to walk you through a timeline. My timeline." A quiet ripple moved through the audience. David clicked the remote. Slide 1. A simple date. A starting point. When everything was normal. He spoke evenly as the slideshow transitioned. Documents appeared. Digital receipts. Screenshots of email threads. Time-stamped text messages. Everything organized with almost obsessive precision. "On this date," David continued, "my wife told me she was working late. She wasn't." Click. A still from security footage appeared, grainy but decisive. Isabella entering a hotel with someone familiar. A few gasps were heard. A whisper from somewhere in the back. "Oh my God, that's..." David continued before the name could finish. "Now, I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because people deserve clarity when deception affects an entire circle of lives." He moved through the timeline steadily, never raising his voice, never wavering. Slide after slide. Footage from his own home's cameras showing inconsistencies between what Isabella said and what actually occurred. Screen-recorded bank statements revealing money quietly redirected, small amounts at first, then large transfers that raised eyebrows in the audience. A woman in the front row covered her mouth as she realized what the numbers meant. David remained composed. "These documents," he said, tapping the stack beside him, "are all legally obtained. They belong to our household, our accounts, our shared devices. Nothing here is fabricated." More slides. Messages between Isabella and her affair partner, her best friend's husband. Bits of conversations, cropped not to sensationalize, but to create a clear timeline. He never showed anything intimate or explicit, only the truth. "My intention," he said, "is not vengeance. My intention is closure." But the crowd was already stunned. Some of Isabella's friends were stone-faced, their once dismissive smirks replaced with wide-eyed disbelief. A few exchanged glances, uncomfortable now that the laughter they once shared at brunch had been replaced by a deep, awkward silence. David clicked again. Slide. The fraud. The air thickened. "I discovered several fraudulent signatures on business documents," he said, lifting a duplicate copy. "Some of you here may recognize your own file numbers." A startled murmur swept across the tables. One man raised his hand slightly, as if wanting to ask a question, but unsure if he should. David continued gently, "I'll speak with each of you privately to ensure everything is properly corrected. Nothing will be pursued without your involvement." The responsible professionalism in his tone made the room even quieter. He moved on. Photos of events Isabella claimed to be attending that never existed. Calendar entries falsified to create alibis. Messages from her own friends, unknowingly helping maintain her narrative. He paused, letting the information settle, then clicked again. Final slide. A blank background. A single sentence. "Thank you for listening." David let the remote fall to his side. He looked at them, 173 faces, a sea of shock, pity, anger, and awe. "This," he said softly, "was my life for the last several years. I thought I was losing my mind. It turns out I was losing my marriage instead." He gave a small, bittersweet smile. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm relieved, and I wanted to share the truth with the people who were part of our world, so you know what actually happened, not the version written to make me look unworthy." He stepped away from the podium. Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. For a moment, David wondered, are they judging me? Are they embarrassed for me? Do they think I should have kept this private? Then a sudden sound cut through the quiet. Clap. One single, firm clap. David turned toward the source. His father, usually stoic, rarely expressive, was standing. Back straight, chest lifted, eyes glimmering with something like pride. He clapped again, and then the room shifted. A second person rose, then a third, then a fourth, and within seconds, all 173 guests were on their feet, applause rising like a wave breaking after holding its breath too long. David stood motionless in the center of the storm, the sound washing over him. A standing ovation. For him, for the truth, for finally walking free. Chapter 8, A Night of Healing. The applause still echoed in David's ears long after it faded. He hadn't expected it, hadn't even imagined it. But once the final clap died away, something inside him loosened, as if the chains that had wrapped around his chest for years had decided to fall off all at once. The lights warmed. Soft music replaced the tense silence that had held the crowd captive during the presentation. And suddenly, the event, once heavy, tense, and clinical, shifted into something else entirely. Something human. Something healing. David stepped off the small stage, and before he had even made it halfway toward the refreshment tables, a man in his mid-40s with tired eyes approached him. "David, right?" the man asked. David nodded. "Yes." The man extended his hand, gripping David's with surprising firmness. "I'm Michael. We met briefly at your engagement party a few years back. I just want to say your courage tonight, man. That took guts." He swallowed hard, voice cracking. "I went through something similar last year. I didn't have the strength to confront it like you did. I kept quiet. Lost friends because she spun her own version first. Seeing you stand up there, well, it gave me a bit of closure I didn't get." David blinked, touched. "Thank you. Really. I'm sorry you went through that." Michael nodded slowly. "Tonight helped more than you know." Just as he stepped aside, a woman in a navy dress approached hesitantly. She looked familiar, one of Sarah's friends, though he couldn't recall her name. "David?" she whispered. "Yes." She exhaled shakily. "I owe you an apology." David tilted his head. "You don't owe me anything." "No," she said firmly. "I do. I laughed at brunch that day. I laughed because I trusted her, and I trusted what she'd said about you over the years. Seeing all this tonight, your timeline, the evidence, God, I feel sick." Her eyes watered. "We suspected something was off." She lied often. She made little digs about you when you weren't around. But we stayed quiet. We let her paint you as some cold, inattentive man. And to see how wrong we were tonight, I'm so sorry. David felt no bitterness. Surprisingly, no anger. Only a strange, warm release. "Thank you for saying that," he said softly. "I appreciate it." Her shoulders slumped with relief. "You deserve better than what she did to you." Before he could respond, two more women approached, also part of Sarah's circle. They hovered nervously, twisting their fingers. "Can we talk?" one asked. David nodded. They stepped closer, speaking in quiet, confessional tones. "We knew she was withdrawing money," one said. "She bragged that she had backup in case the marriage ended." "We didn't know it was your money." "We noticed she was talking to several people behind your back," the other added. "We didn't know it was this bad. If we did, we would have said something." "She manipulated us too." David offered them a small, forgiving smile. "It's okay. She fooled me too." They lingered a moment, then hugged him, awkwardly at first, then with genuine warmth, before stepping away to allow others to speak with him. But the most surprising part of the night came later. It started with a young man approaching David with a folder in his hands. "I think Sarah defrauded me too," he said anxiously. "Different situation, but when you mentioned signatures, something clicked." Then another person came, and another, and another. One woman carried a small notebook trembling in her grip. "She convinced me to invest in a joint project 2 years ago. I never saw that money again." A man in glasses adjusted them nervously. "She used my personal info to register for something without consent. I didn't know who to talk to." Within 20 minutes, a small group had formed near the back corner, 6, then 10, then nearly 12 people, all sharing eerily similar stories. Fraud, misrepresentation, manipulation through charm. Lies crafted so neatly they had gone unquestioned for years. David approached them slowly, listening, not interrupting. A woman with red hair said, "I thought I was alone. I thought I was stupid." "You're not," another replied. She made it impossible to question anything. "We should keep in touch," someone suggested. "If we all share what we know, maybe we can finally put the pieces together." David watched as they exchanged numbers, formed a group chat, and even discussed meeting once a month. A support group, a safety net, born right there, in the middle of his truth-telling celebration. He felt almost emotional at the sight. These weren't just victims. They were people reclaiming their agency. People stepping out of years of shame and confusion together. Meanwhile, the rest of the venue transformed. Laughter began to rise, soft at first, then stronger. Someone ordered a round of drinks. The bartenders loosened their ties and increased the music volume. People mingled, told stories, hugged, reconnected. David's cousin slapped him gently on the back. "I'm proud of you, man. I've never seen a room shift like that." From shock to solidarity. His aunt hugged him next. "You're finally glowing again," she whispered warmly. His co-workers shook his hand proudly. His childhood friends pulled him into a three-way hug. Even people he barely knew came just to say, "Thank you for sharing your truth." David felt lighter, lighter than he had in years. He found himself laughing, actual laughter, not the hollow kind he'd grown used to. He cracked jokes. He listened to others' stories. He danced for a bit when his friends dragged him to the center of the floor. Sweat on his forehead, breath short, heart full. The night had become something unrecognizable from where it began. No longer a presentation. No longer the unveiling of a betrayal. But a celebration of truth, of survival, of community, of new beginnings. Around 12:45 a.m., someone shouted from across the room, "Turn up the music. Tonight's about freedom." Cheers erupted. The lights dimmed to warm gold. People kicked off heels, loosened ties, and let the heaviness of their own past wounds dissolve into the music vibrating through the room. At 1:30 a.m., David found himself standing with a group of Sarah's other victims again, watching them exchange final stories. "We're meeting next week," one of the men said, smiling. "You save us a lot of time and pain by coming forward." "Thank you," a woman added softly. "Your courage helped all of us tonight." David smiled, chest full. "We helped each other." A warm hush settled over him as he glanced around the venue. Strangers had become allies. Old friends had returned. Apologies had been made. Stories had been shared. Tears, laughter, heart-to-hearts. It had all woven into a kind of collective healing he never could have imagined. By the time the last song faded and the final group walked out the door, someone checked a phone. Holy hell, it's almost 2 a.m. David blinked, stunned. The night had flown. It had healed. It had transformed. Chapter 9. Consequences for Sarah. The weeks after the Dodge to Disaster party were a whirlwind. David returned home to a quieter apartment, but the quiet was a far cry from peace. The world outside buzzed with news of Sarah's exposure. Through subtle channels and official notices, the legal system began moving, gears grinding steadily toward consequences. Detective Morales called one crisp Tuesday morning. "David, we've compiled the evidence you submitted," he said. "James has corroborated everything. The financial institutions confirmed the fraudulent accounts. The case is strong. We're ready to forward the charges." David's hands trembled slightly around the phone. "So, she's going to be held accountable?" Morales' voice was patient, firm. "Yes. All signs indicate she will face conviction. Fraud, identity theft, multiple victims. The full extent is documented." David leaned back in his chair, a mix of relief and residual tension coursing through him. Finally, justice wasn't a distant, abstract concept. It was tangible, moving through the proper channels. The arrest. It wasn't long before Sarah was formally arrested. David followed the case from a distance, observing the careful, procedural nature of law enforcement. He didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in seeing a person he had once loved led away in handcuffs. But there was relief. Relief that the pattern of deception could no longer reach out and harm anyone else. His phone buzzed again, messages from friends, family, and even strangers who had followed the story. "I can't believe she got caught. Justice at last. You're stronger than most people would be in your shoes." David read each message quietly, nodding to himself. Court proceedings. The courtroom was clinical, sterile, and intimidating. Yet, each day he attended or reviewed through court transcripts added layers of understanding. Lawyers laid out evidence with precision. Bank statements, credit card reports, emails, text messages, and testimonies from James and other victims. One morning, he found himself seated beside his father. "She really thought she could get away with this," his father murmured. "No one expects the lies to stack up like this." David nodded, not wanting to acknowledge the residual ache of betrayal. "She underestimated the power of truth," he replied, "and overestimated how easily people would believe her story." The judge's voice finally came down with authority. The verdict: guilty on multiple counts, identity theft, fraud, and related charges. Sentencing. The courtroom was heavy with silence as the sentence was read aloud. 18 months in minimum security prison. 5 years probation. Repayment of $183,000 to 7 victims, including David. Gasps echoed quietly in the gallery. David's stomach twisted, not in anger, but in the surreal sense of finality. The judge's words rang with finality. The court recognizes the calculated nature of these offenses, the betrayal of trust, and the financial and emotional harm inflicted upon multiple individuals. This sentence aims to reflect the seriousness of the crime while providing restitution where possible. David exhaled slowly, feeling a tangible weight lift from his chest. Accountability had been delivered. The invisible burden that had lingered since that brunch, since the discovery of the debt, since every stolen moment of trust, was now being addressed. The social collapse. News of Sarah's conviction spread like wildfire. Her once glittering social circle fractured as the full scope of her lies became impossible to ignore. Friends who had once laughed at David's expense distanced themselves, embarrassed by their complicity or ignorance. Professional contacts reconsidered affiliations. David received a message from Elise, one of Sarah's friends from the brunch day. "I can't believe it went this far. I'm sorry, David. I should have listened sooner. I should have questioned her." David typed a calm, concise response. "Thank you for saying that. It's not too late to do the right thing." Her reply came minutes later. "I will. Thank you for your grace." The collapse wasn't instantaneous. It unfolded over weeks through quiet realizations, confrontations, and admissions. But each ripple reinforced a truth David had come to embrace. Deception could only survive in the shadows. Once illuminated, it could no longer sustain itself. David's healing process. Meanwhile, David began therapy. Initially, it felt strange, almost unnecessary. He had presented facts to hundreds of people, shared his story with strangers, reclaimed his dignity publicly. Yet, in the quiet of the therapist's office, he found a different kind of relief. "Tell me what keeps you awake at night," the therapist said one afternoon. David considered, then spoke honestly. "Not the humiliation, not the lies, not even the debt. It's the trust, knowing I allowed someone to manipulate me so completely. I want to understand why I didn't see it sooner." The therapist nodded. Healing isn't just about seeing the truth. It's about forgiving yourself for being human and learning boundaries for the future. David exhaled. "I think I'm ready for that." Sessions became a space to unpack layers of confusion, anger, grief, and relief. He learned to process the betrayal without internalizing it. He set boundaries. He defined what he would and wouldn't accept moving forward. Reconnecting with friends. Therapy wasn't his only outlet. David reconnected with old friends who had drifted away, in part because of Sarah's manipulations, in part because life simply moves forward. One Friday evening, he met with his college friend Aaron at a small, dimly lit pub. "Man, I was worried about you," Aaron said, handing him a cold beer. "After everything, you seemed off, like carrying bricks in your chest." David chuckled softly. "I was. I still am, sometimes. But tonight, I feel lighter than I have in years." Aaron leaned back, smiling. "You deserve that. After everything, you earned the right to peace." Over the following weeks, similar reconnections occurred. Coffee dates, dinner gatherings, casual walks. These small acts of normalcy reinforced the rebuilding of a life interrupted by lies and betrayal. Each conversation reminded David of who he was outside of Sarah's shadow. Final reflection. By the time the last restitution checks were processed and the legal paperwork finalized, David recognized a quiet but profound shift. The world around him had settled into a new rhythm. Sarah's consequences were concrete. Her social circle had crumbled. And most importantly, David was reclaiming his own life, not defined by humiliation or deceit, but by truth, resilience, and recovery. He sat in his apartment one evening, journal open on the coffee table. He wrote slowly, "I survived. I exposed the lies. I am rebuilding. The future isn't about vengeance. It's about growth, honesty, and freedom." For the first time since that brunch, he allowed himself a smile that felt genuine. He no longer flinched at messages, notifications, or unexpected phone calls. He no longer recoiled at memories of Sarah. He had faced betrayal, fraud, and manipulation, and he had emerged intact. Not unscathed, no, wounds remained, but stronger, wiser, and finally free to step forward on his own terms. Therapy sessions, meaningful friendships, accountability from Sarah, and the overwhelming support of his family had all formed a scaffolding upon which he could rebuild. And as he closed his journal that night, David knew that this was more than recovery. It was a declaration. He would live his life fully, authentically, and deliberately. He was no longer a victim. Chapter 10, Rebirth and Moving Forward. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, painting David's apartment in soft gold. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee steaming beside him, and let himself finally breathe. It was quiet, Not the tense, anxious quiet that had filled his apartment for months, but the kind of stillness that feels like a new beginning. He reflected on everything that had happened. The public humiliation at brunch, the discovery of the $47,000 debt, the shocking affairs, the confrontation with James, the legal battles, the dodged a disaster party, and the eventual consequences Sarah faced. Each memory, once a wound, now felt like a step on a path leading somewhere stronger, somewhere freer. David's phone buzzed. A message from James. Coffee today? Got a new lead on the other folks she scammed? Could be good to connect them. David smiled. James had become more than a confidant. He was a friend forged through shared betrayal. A man who understood the complexity of being deceived by someone who seemed trustworthy. Absolutely. Let's meet at 11, he typed back. He took a sip of coffee, feeling warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt genuinely connected, not just to people but to life itself. Friendships forged in fire. Over the following months, David and James maintained a steady line of communication. They often met for coffee, lunch, or long walks through the city. Occasionally, they would connect with the other victims Sarah had left in her wake. Slowly, a support network formed, not of pity, but of understanding, resilience, and shared humor about surviving the impossible. One evening, David and James sat at a small cafe overlooking the river. Remember that night at the Dodged a Disaster party? James asked, grinning. David laughed. How could I forget? You were the calmest witness to chaos I've ever seen. James shrugged. I was terrified inside, but seeing the truth laid out, I don't think I've ever felt freer. You saved all of us that night. David looked at him, words catching in his throat. We saved each other, really. None of this would have meant anything without witnesses, without allies, without someone to remind me I wasn't going crazy. James nodded solemnly. Agreed. It's rare, finding people who understand betrayal without judgment. I think we built something good from all the wreckage. They clinked coffee cups together. A small gesture, but for David, it felt monumental. Returning to normal life. David slowly began reclaiming his daily routines. He returned to work with renewed energy, reconnecting with colleagues he had drifted from while dealing with Sarah's deception. He made time for old friends, meeting them for dinners, weekend hikes, and casual evenings in the city. One Friday, his friend Mia called. Hey, stranger, she said. How's life now that the dust has settled? David chuckled. Better than I could have imagined. You know that party? It became legendary. People are still talking about it. Mia laughed. I told you. You turned humiliation into history. People will remember that night for years. And more importantly, you survived with dignity. David smiled. And I feel like I finally can move forward without carrying the weight of lies anymore. Opening up to love again. Months passed, and David felt ready to explore romance once more. The betrayal had left scars, but therapy, support, and reflection had given him tools he hadn't had before. This time, he approached relationships with caution, honesty, and firm boundaries. On a sunny Saturday, he met someone new at a mutual friends gathering. She was warm, intelligent, and unapologetically herself. David, she said with a playful smile, I think I'm going to need a full story about your infamous dodged a disaster party. He laughed, shaking his head. It's a long story, but it's worth telling. She leaned forward, curiosity sparking in her eyes. I like a man who survived chaos and came out stronger. David felt a thrill of genuine connection, untainted by deception or fear. For the first time, he realized he could enjoy companionship without the shadow of betrayal looming over every interaction. Legacy of the party. The Dodged a Disaster party became more than a personal catharsis. It transformed into a local legend. Friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances referenced it in casual conversations. Did you hear about David's party? That man literally turned humiliation into a movement of truth. I can't believe he laid it all out and stayed calm. It became a story of empowerment, a cautionary tale, and a symbol of reclaiming dignity. For David, it wasn't about fame. It was about the tangible proof that the truth, when handled courageously, could heal and unite. Even local news outlets mentioned the unusual event, not sensationalizing it, but acknowledging the meticulous way David had presented facts and allowed people to see the full truth. Invitations, evidence, and clarity all had become part of the story that inspired others who had experienced betrayal or deceit. Reflection and gratitude. One evening, David sat alone on his balcony, overlooking the city lights shimmering against the dark river. He held a notebook, pen poised, as he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He wrote slowly, "I survived betrayal. I survived humiliation. I survived financial danger. And I walked away stronger, wiser, and free. I have friends who understand me. I have allies who have shared my pain and helped me heal. I have a life rebuilt from truth, not lies. I am grateful for clarity, for support, for the freedom to choose my path. And I am grateful that the future I avoided would have been a life built on deceit and destruction." He set the pen down and inhaled the crisp night air. The sound of the city below felt comforting, rhythmic, alive. He thought of James, of the victims who had formed the support group, of friends who had apologized, and of the lessons learned through pain. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for survival, but for the clarity that came with it. And he allowed himself a quiet smile. A life reclaimed. David recognized that his life was no longer dictated by fear, lies, or manipulation. Every choice he made now was grounded in authenticity, resilience, and the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had faced darkness and emerged into light. He had learned to trust again, to connect deeply, and to set firm boundaries. He had learned that betrayal, though devastating, could become a catalyst for transformation. His apartment no longer felt like a refuge from chaos. It felt like a sanctuary for reflection, growth, and possibility. He kept mementos, not reminders of pain, but of lessons learned. A printed invitation from the Dodged a Disaster party, a framed photo of him with James and other victims, and a few handwritten notes from friends expressing gratitude for his courage. Each item was a marker of rebirth. Final gratitude. David closed his journal, took a final sip of coffee, and leaned back in his chair. He let the city sounds filter in, the hum of traffic, distant laughter, occasional sirens, and realized how fully alive he felt. He had survived a betrayal that could have destroyed him. He had reclaimed his dignity, rebuilt his relationships, and found new ways to love and trust. The future he once feared, the life that would have been hollow, manipulative, and destructive, was gone. And in its place, freedom, truth, resilience. David whispered softly to himself, almost in awe, "Thank you for clarity, for support, and for the life I have now." And with that, he felt complete. The past no longer chained him. The present was fully his. And the future, limitless. And that is exactly where this chapter ends.